The Canadian 1-cent coin dated 1947 with the Latin inscription Georgieve 6D Grex is one of the most historically significant and collectible circulation pennies of Canada because it sits at a moment of constitutional change, royal transition, and post-war economic adjustment, making it far more than a simple small copper coin, struck during the reign of King George VI, whose Latin title translates to George VI, by the grace of God, King. This cent reflects the final phase of the British Empire's traditional royal titulature before Canada formally updated its coin legends to remove reference to imperial authority, and although the coin bears the date 1947, the majority of pieces were actually minted in 1948, creating a unique situation in which the date does not match the year of production, a fact that fascinates collectors and adds to its importance. The reason for this anomaly lies in Canada's adoption of the Canadian Citizenship Act, which came into effect on January 1, 1947, legally redefining Canadians as citizens of Canada rather than British subjects, prompting the Royal Canadian Mint to redesign the obverse legend by removing the phrase ETIND, IMP Emperor of India, following India's independence, but because new master dies with the updated inscription were not ready immediately. The Mint continued striking cents dated 1947 well into 1948 using the older obverse dies, and to differentiate these later strikes from earlier ones, a small maple leaf was discreetly placed after the date on some coins, resulting in two recognized varieties, the 1947 plain, no maple leaf, and the scarcer and more desirable 1947 maple leaf variety. The obverse of the coin features a dignified left-facing portrait of King George VI, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, showing the king without a crown in a realistic and restrained style typical of mid-20th century British Commonwealth coinage, surrounded by the Latin legend Georgieve 6D Grex, while the reverse displays the iconic Canadian maple leaves on a twig, designed by George Edward Kruger Gray, a motif first introduced in 1937 and used for decades, symbolizing Canada's natural identity and unity. Compositionally, the 1947 cent is made of bronze, approximately 98% copper with tin and zinc, giving it a warm reddish-brown color when uncirculated. Though most surviving examples range from brown to dark chocolate tones due to oxidation and circulation wear, the coin measures 19.05 millimeters in diameter, weighs 3.24 grams, and has a plain edge aligning with standard Canadian cent specifications of the era. In terms of mintage, millions of 1947 dated cents were produced overall, but the maple leaf variety represents a much smaller subset, making it notably scarcer, especially in higher grades such as extremely fine EF, about uncirculated AU and mint state MS, where sharp details in the king's hair, crisp lettering, and strong leaf veins are essential for premium valuation. Historically, this coin circulated widely during a period of post-World War II recovery, when Canada was transitioning from wartime austerity to peacetime growth, and the humble cent played a vital role in daily commerce, purchasing basic goods and symbolizing stability in a changing world. Today, the 1947 Georgieves cent is highly respected among numismatists not for precious metal value but for its constitutional, political, and historical significance, serving as a tangible reminder of Canada's evolution from a dominion closely tied to the British Empire toward a more autonomous national identity. Collectors often seek both varieties to complete George VI cent sets, and while common circulated examples are affordable, well-preserved pieces, particularly the maple leaf issue, can command significantly higher prices, especially if free from corrosion, heavy scratches, or cleaning, as original surfaces are strongly preferred. Beyond market value, the coin's enduring appeal lies in its story, a small bronze cent that quietly marks the end of imperial language on Canadian coinage, the assertion of Canadian citizenship, and the final years of a wartime king whose reign bridged tradition and modernity, making the 1947 Canadian 1-cent Georgieve 6 not merely a coin, but a compact historical document struck in metal. Next, top 2. The Canadian 1-cent coin dated 1981 featuring Queen Elizabeth II represents the final phase of Canada's long-running small cent tradition before major changes in minting technology, metal composition, and eventually the discontinuation of the denomination itself. And although at first glance it appears to be a very common modern penny, it carries historical, economic, and numismatic importance because it reflects Canada at the beginning of the 1980s, a period marked by inflation, technological transition at the Royal Canadian Mint, and the maturation of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. The obverse of the coin displays a right-facing portrait of Queen Elizabeth II designed by Arnold Mackin, a refined and youthful effigy introduced in 1965 and used on Canadian cents through 1989, showing the Queen wearing a laurel wreath symbolizing dignity, continuity, and classical authority, with the Latin inscription Elizabeth II DG Regina, encircling the portrait, translating to Elizabeth II. By the grace of God, Queen, a traditional royal title that emphasizes constitutional monarchy rather than imperial power, reflecting Canada's fully sovereign status by this time. The reverse continues the iconic maple leaves on a twig design by George Edward Kruger Gray, a national symbol deeply associated with Canada's identity, resilience, and natural heritage, with the denomination 1 cent, and the date 1981 clearly displayed, making the coin immediately recognizable to generations of Canadians who used it in everyday transactions. Compositionally, the 1981 cent is made primarily of copper, approximately 98% copper, with small amounts of tin and zinc, one of the last years before later cents adopted copper-plated zinc and steel cores, giving the coin a traditional reddish-brown color when new and a darker brown patina after circulation. It measures 19.05 millimeters in diameter, weighs 3.24 grams, and has a plain edge, consistent with standard specifications that had remained largely unchanged since the mid-20th century. The Royal Canadian Mint produced tens of millions of these cents in 1981, as inflation and high production volumes required vast quantities of small change for vending machines, transit systems, and retail pricing, making the coin extremely common in circulated condition and still widely found in old jars, rolls, and collections. Historically, this coin circulated during a time when the purchasing power of 1 cent was already declining, yet it remained essential for precise pricing and tax calculations, symbolizing both the persistence and the approaching obsolescence of the smallest unit of Canadian currency. From a numismatic perspective, the 1981 cent is generally considered common, with modest value in circulated grades, but it becomes more interesting in high-grade uncirculated, MS condition, especially examples with full red color, RD, strong strike, and minimal spotting, which are increasingly difficult to find due to oxidation and handling over time. While there are no major die varieties as famous as earlier maple leaf or dot issues, collectors still examine 1981 cents for minor errors such as die cracks, off-center strikes, or planchet flaws, which can add niche interest and value. Culturally, the coin reflects Queen Elizabeth II's long and stable presence on Canadian coinage, reinforcing continuity across decades while Canada itself evolved socially, politically, and economically. Today, the 1981 Canadian 1 cent is appreciated not for rarity or intrinsic metal worth, but as a representative artifact of everyday Canadian life in the late, a reminder of a denomination that once played a crucial role in commerce but has since been discontinued, making even this common penny a small historical witness to changing monetary practices, national identity, and the enduring symbolism of the maple leaf under the reign. Next, top 3. The Canadian 1 cent coin dated 1984 featuring Queen Elizabeth II belongs to the late modern era of Canada's penny series and represents a time when the 1 cent denomination was still an essential part of daily transactions, even though its purchasing power had already declined significantly, and as with other cents of the early 1980s, this coin reflects economic pressures, evolving minting practices, and the long continuity of Queen Elizabeth II's image on Canadian currency. The obverse shows a right-facing portrait of Queen Elizabeth II designed by Arnold Mackin, first introduced on Canadian coins in 1965 and used for many years, depicting the Queen with a calm, idealized expression and wearing a laurel wreath that echoes classical imagery and symbolizes stability, authority, and continuity, while the surrounding Latin inscription Elizabeth II DG Regina translates to Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen, emphasizing Canada's constitutional monarchy and its mature national sovereignty rather than any imperial claim. The reverse carries the familiar maple leaves on a twig motif designed by George Edward Kruger Gray, a design that had become one of the most enduring symbols in Canadian numismatics, representing the nation's natural heritage, unity, and resilience, accompanied by the denomination 1 cent and the date 1984, making the coin instantly recognizable to Canadians who used it in everyday commerce. The 1984 cent is composed of bronze, approximately 98% copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, giving it a rich reddish color when newly struck that typically darkens to brown over time due to oxidation, and it maintains standard cent specifications of 19.05 millimeters diameter, 3.24 grams weight, and a plain edge, reflecting remarkable continuity in size and composition that had lasted for decades. The Royal Canadian Mint struck a very large mintage in 1984, numbering in the tens of millions, to meet circulation demands during a period of inflation, heavy cash usage, and price structures that still relied on 1 cent increments, which means the coin is extremely common in circulated grades today and remains easy to find in collections, coin jars, and old bankrolls. Historically, the coin circulated during a period of economic adjustment in Canada marked by rising interest rates earlier in the decade, technological modernization, and gradual changes in how money was produced and used, with the penny increasingly seen as more symbolic than practical, even as it continued to serve an important accounting role. From a numismatic standpoint, the 1984 cent holds modest value in worn condition, but it gains greater interest in uncirculated and mint-state examples, particularly those retaining original red, RD surfaces without heavy spotting or fingerprints, as copper coins from this era are prone to discoloration, and collectors also watch for minor mint errors such as die cracks, off-center strikes, and weakly struck letters which can add specialized appeal. Culturally, The coin reflects the entrenched presence of Queen Elizabeth II on Canadian coinage, reinforcing a sense of continuity across generations, while the persistent maple leaf design underscores Canada's distinct national identity. Today, although the 1-cent coin has been discontinued and withdrawn from circulation, the 1984 Canadian 1-cent survives as a familiar and tangible reminder of everyday life in Canada, illustrating how even a very common coin can carry historical meaning as a witness to changing economic realities, evolving monetary policy, and the enduring symbols of the Canadian nation under the reign of next top 4. The Canadian 1-cent coin dated 1994 featuring Queen Elizabeth II represents the final decade of active circulation for Canada's penny and stands as a clear example of how traditional coin designs were maintained even as the country moved toward modernized currency systems and eventually the elimination of the denomination. And while the coin is common, it holds historical and cultural value because it reflects Canada in the mid-1990s, a period shaped by economic restructuring, technological change, and evolving attitudes towards small-value coinage. The obverse of the 1994 cent shows a right-facing portrait of Queen Elizabeth II designed by Dora de Petrie Hunt, introduced in 1990 to mark a more mature stage of the Queen's reign, portraying her with greater realism, wearing a royal diadem rather than the earlier laurel wreath, and conveying dignity, experience, and continuity, with the surrounding Latin inscription Elizabeth II DG Regina, meaning Elizabeth II, by the grace of God Queen, reaffirming Canada's constitutional monarchy. The reverse continues the long-standing maple leaves on a twig design by George Edward Kruger Gray, unchanged in concept since 1937 and deeply embedded in Canadian identity, symbolizing unity, nature, and national pride, with the denomination 1 cent and the date 1994 clearly placed. Compositionally, the 1994 cent marks an important transition because it is made of copper-plated steel, introduced in the early 1990s to reduce production costs, replacing the earlier nearly pure copper-bronze composition, resulting in a coin that appears copper-colored but is magnetic and significantly cheaper to produce, with a weight of approximately 2.25 grams, a diameter of 19.05 millimeters, and a plain edge, maintaining familiar size while modernizing materials. The Royal Canadian Mint struck hundreds of millions of cents in 1994, reflecting both heavy circulation demand and the mint's efficiency in mass production during this period, which makes the coin extremely common in circulated condition and still easily found in collections, bulk lots, and family coin jars. Historically, the coin circulated during a time when the penny's purchasing power had become minimal, often used more for pricing psychology and accounting precision than for real buying power, foreshadowing the debates that would eventually lead to the penny's discontinuation in 2012. From a numismatic perspective, the 1994 cent is generally valued as a type coin rather than a rarity, with most examples worth face value unless in uncirculated or high-grade mint state, where coins with clean surfaces, strong strikes, and minimal plating issues are more desirable, as copper-plated steel cents are prone to corrosion if the plating is damaged. Collectors also watch for minor mint errors such as off-center strikes, plating blisters, or die cracks, which can add specialized interest. Culturally and symbolically, the coin reflects a mature and modern Canada that retained traditional imagery while quietly adapting its coinage to economic realities, and today the 1994 Canadian 1 cent featuring Elizabeth II serves as a modest but meaningful artifact of everyday life in the 1990s, illustrating the final evolutionary stage of the penny before its disappearance, and reminding collectors and historians alike that even the smallest denomination can carry a story of national identity, technological change, and the long reign of Queen Elizabeth II.